Well, hello there, and welcome to the US Web Design System monthly call for February of 2020. And this is the sort of Valentine's Day theme for the logo. Hope you like it. Hey there, thanks for being here. My name is Dan Williams, and I'm the project lead for the US Web Design System. And thanks for being here in particular on this very auspicious day of many zeros and twos on February 20th, 2020. We've got a great hour planned for today with starting with a few product updates to get going. And then once I finish up with those product updates and a little bit about what we're doing over the next month, then we'll get to the focus of today's call, which is a panel discussion on website standards, design system maturity, and where we go from here. We've got a great group of folks who are here to talk with you and me about the design system and about website maturity. Not website maturity, but design system maturity. So there should be some time also for a Q&A at the end. We've got a lot of folks on the call today, so if you haven't already, those on the call should introduce themselves in the chat. And if you have a question, please add it to the chat along with a couple words about who you are, and we'll get to it at the end of the call. So without any further ado, product updates. We just released last week, was it the week before now? Who can remember? But available now is Design System 2.5.0, and that's kind of like better late than never. Kind of teased it in the last meeting, saying that it was going to be out in the next couple days, and then it didn't come out in the next couple days. As we were going through it, it was one of those releases where it just kept uncovering new things and made it a little bit more delayed than we were hoping it would be delayed. But I think at the end of the day, it was a good and useful release that I'm excited to talk about. So it has improved component accessibility and testing. One of the things that we did was we updated our version of AxeCore that we were using for testing the design system from 2.6 release to 3.4 release. And that means that it's testing the testing system is a little bit more robust, and we were finding some things that we weren't finding before. We've made some accessibility improvements. These are mostly minor improvements to the markup, to the banner, to the graphic list, to search, footer, and hero. Most of those changes are either changing the value of a heading, like maybe a heading that once was H3 is now an H2, but it's also adding things like ARIA labels to some of these components. All of this is spelled out in a little bit more detail on our GitHub release page, which is at USWDS GitHub/USWDS/USWDS/releases. We made some improvements to all of those components from the accessibility angle, and we also improved the accessibility of our markup in the documentation template. So if documentation template is a template that you use in a product, you should check out the modest but useful changes that we've made to the documentation template. One of the other changes in Design System 2.5 is that we are now allowing non-token values in state color settings. This is sort of an extension of the work that we did in Design System 2.4, where we did the same thing for theme color settings. And essentially what this means is that previous to this release, if you were setting the value of something like the warning color or the error color for your project, you were previously restricted to using design system tokens like red 50 or green 30V. And now we are allowing some custom hex values to go into these state color settings. So if you have some constraints around colors in your project, you're not able for whatever reason to use design system tokens in your project, then you can still use the design system and you can add the custom colors you need into your state colors, and you can sync them up with the theme colors and have a consistent set of colors across the whole project. And we've updated to the Canonical Sass compiler for our project. We've updated to Dart Sass, which is the Sass compiler that is built by the Sass team. And that's good because previously we were using something called libsass, and that was pretty much the same as Dart Sass, but just different enough that we were seeing some quirks. Now that we've updated to Dart Sass, this should give us better compatibility across the board. Should give us some feature parity with the main branch of Sass, so that we can use all the new features that have just recently been built into Sass. And it will prevent sort of inadvertent inconsistencies between compilers. We saw some bugs coming out in 2.4 where things were compiling properly for us locally using libsass, but in other environments where they were compiling with something based on Dart Sass, it was throwing errors. Now we're on Dart Sass. We want to be able to build on that canonical compiler, and we want to be able to encourage teams to use the default canonical Sass compiler where they can, so that we're all using the same kind of Sass across the board. And we, in 2.5, we got rid of the media query sorting requirement for compiling the Sass. Like, this is something of an obscure requirement, but what it meant was that previous to USWDS 2.5, we sort of required an extension to the compiler that ordered the media queries in the sort of the screen size order to make the utilities cascade properly. And now they cascade properly without this. So this is no longer a requirement. Any way you compile the Sass, you should find a good output. You should find that the utilities are working the way we expect them to work, and you don't need to add anything extra on to make the design system work properly, other than auto prefixer. We still are now using a tool to sort the media queries, just to make our code a little bit more, to make it a little bit more compressed, but it's no longer necessary to make it work properly. In the process of doing this, we sort of upgraded the minifier that we use to minify our CSS from CSS Nano to another slightly more popular minifier called CSSO. And between all these things, it has resulted in some increased performance and improved performance that we're seeing we're reducing our build time by about 20%, and that we're modestly reducing the size of the CSS output. But all these changes are not only making the design system more reliable, but they are in general making it faster, which is good. So there are a few next steps that are a result of Design System 2.5. If you want to see the accessibility improvements that we are pushing out into our default components, you'll need to update your markup to be in sync with the most recent version of these components. And you can check out our releases pages to see exactly what has changed from version to version on these components. And also, if possible, it would be good to update your Sass compile workflows. So we changed from compiling our Sass with libsass to compiling it with Dart Sass. And we started minifying with CSSO instead of CSS Nano. And these are things that are probably good to mimic in your own setups as well. So we have updated the our gulp workflow repo, USWDS gulp, to reflect the changes that we made in USWDS 2.5. And so you can update your gulp. If you use gulp or something like gulp, you can update your workflow to mimic what we're doing. And likely, if you do so, you will see a similar sort of performance boost. And then things that are coming soon, coming in March, we're working to improve our sketch assets. So if you're a visual designer and you use the sketch assets, we're trying to improve the way that those are organized. In the current version, there are a lot of libraries to import, and we're consolidating those libraries into a single library, which should make everything easier to manage. And we're organizing the files better and organizing the components better on the sticker sheet, so that's easier to find what you need and apply it to one of your own projects. Additionally, trying to put a little more effort into just how you customize, making it easier to customize the default components for visual designers. And all of that's coming soon in the next version of the USWDS sketch assets. Coming in March, we hope to release the design system card component. It's been sort of a long time coming, and this one should be out soon. We're working on finishing up some of the preliminary guidance around it and building that out now. We'll be doing some testing of that component and reaching out to folks probably in the USWDS public channel to look at what we've done before this officially comes out, but look for more news about the design system card component over the next few weeks. Similarly, the card component is just one of the first steps in the 2020 product roadmap, which we're working on finalizing right now and hope to talk about in a bigger way next month. So there's a bunch of things we're working on from the components and functionality side, as well as some other items that relate to the workflow we have in the design system, how you contribute work back into the system, and what we're beginning to do to think about the future of the design system. All of that will be built into the 2020 roadmap, which I will talk about next month. And finally, it's been a long road for USWDS Jekyll, which happens to always be the second thing on my list, but it's going to be promoted up to the 1.5 thing on my list over the next few weeks. We'll finally get that out the door. So with USWDS Jekyll 5.0, that's a major release update to USWDS Jekyll that begins to use the version 2 code base of USWDS in the USWDS Jekyll theme. And that's nearly ready to go, and that will be released by the time we meet together again in March. And that is everything that's been happening in the last month in the world of USWDS product. And now we can finish talking about that and start to talk a little bit about a panel discussion that we're going to have today. Right now it says website standards, what now? But really, we're getting just a group of folks together to talk about all the kind of changes that have happened in the design system sort of over the last few months, thinking about 21st century idea, thinking about design principles, thinking about USWDS maturity, beginning to just think about what that means for projects and teams right now. So in December, we introduced the idea of design system maturity, which is a practical, long-term, incremental approach to using the design system. It's grounded in a set of 5 design principles that are intended to keep our focus on the behaviors that matter to building great government websites and digital experiences. These are starting from real user needs, earning trust, embracing accessibility, promoting continuity, and listening. And in the service of these principles, we work toward following common user experience guidance and also using a common design language. And the way we express these principles, guidance, and code in our work, in our process, and in our product is what we're calling design system maturity. The USWDS maturity model is what last month we formally established as the website standards referenced by the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act. So the common definition of a design system introduced by the designer and developer Brad Frost is the official story of how your organization designs and builds digital products. So a design system is like the story of how we get to design solutions. Since our design system is explicitly grounded by and proceeds from non-technical design principles, it means that using the design system isn't only for those with technical skills, for designers, developers, and engineers. That we all, program managers, writers, researchers, content strategists, information architects, editors, strategists, others, we all have important, useful roles to play in the success of our projects. So today we're fortunate enough to have an experienced cross-agency panel of practitioners willing to come and talk together about the ideas behind design system maturity. It's a complex topic, and we'll try to look at it from a few angles so we all can begin to understand how to use the lens of maturity to understand what we do well, what we do now, and where we can go from here. So let me begin to introduce who we have on our panel today. We've got Abby Bowman, who is the chief of the web media branch at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Got Jon Raedeke, who is a front-end developer at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I've got Lisa Richman, who's a health communication specialist and UX lead at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Stan Smith, who's the technical team lead on the Web Solutions team for the Office of the Secretary at the Department of Commerce. And Aaron Stienestra, who is a senior design strategist at the Office of Customer Experience here at GSA. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now so we can see all of our nice faces. And first, I guess I just want to say hello and thank you to all of you who agreed to come and talk with us today. I really appreciate you all coming out and being on the Design System Monthly Call. So I think as a way to introduce you all and talk about what you do, I was hoping that we could just talk a little bit, sort of maybe one by one, to just tell us a bit about what you do and how you use the design system, or how you're thinking about design system maturity, which is a new concept, but if you've thought about it, how do you think about it in the context of what you're doing now? Maybe I'll just open it up with to Abby first, as she begins with A.
Yes, sure, I'll take it. So here at ATF, our web media branch, we're really lucky in that our team is integrated with programmers, writers, and content managers, and an accessibility expert all on one team, all in the same row in our hallway. And so that's really enabled us to embrace, I think, the spirit of the maturity model as something that's not just code, not just making your components compliant, but really digging into plain language, accessibility, all these other touch points, and how we're all working towards the same goals. And so I know when that maturity model came out, I had been worried, you know, the ID Act interpretation, when it finally came, the long awaited interpretation, it would be all about code. We all got to make our code the same. And that was a huge sigh of relief, because I'm like, this actually reflects our reality here. It reflects the reality that different teams have different strong areas and weak areas. And so we're really excited to get moving. I worked on commerce.gov back with Stan a little bit ago. And so I've got experience using version 1 of USWDS back then. Here at ATF, we're going to be moving to Drupal 8, moving to USWDS version 2.5.0. But we're practicing with a little mini image library that's an internal site first. So we're all getting some good experience with applying the design system and creating custom components.
Cool. I feel like I'd love to dig in more at some point into like how you're able to do it on a small thing first, and like practice on something that's maybe sort of low stakes before jumping into the mothership or something like that. But why don't we, thank you, Abby, and why don't I just move on to next in alphabetical order to Jon. Hey, Jon.
Sure. Hi. First of all, thanks for all the people working on the design system. Really helped us here at NIST. So we have a small group as well. We're mainly focused on the public website, NIST.gov, and intranet and a handful of other projects, but we keep getting more small projects, and we're mainly on Drupal as well. And we wanted to look at NIST as a whole rather than how to integrate a specific project. So we're kind of working on ways to sort of value add on top of the design system to make a component library for all of NIST to use that are on various platforms, and to just make it easier for everyone to do the right thing and start using common components and things like that. But we kind of, the maturity model thing, we kind of came at it from just a necessity to streamline our, and the wish, like, not to redo all of this work. So we kind of came at it from the code side, but there's a lot of buy-in from, management and everything to work on the UX of all of our applications and websites. We have many websites. And the difficulty is sort of somewhere in between the authors and the people working on the content, needing to sort of get them on board as far as, they want to make this thing bold, and we'd say, well, there's this thing called the design system, so there's a little education in the middle. I think with the IDEA Act that kind of helped with the selling of the importance of it from an organizational standpoint, and then the developers can immediately see, I think, that this makes sense to be using some sort of system government-wide. But so, yeah, thanks for your work. And so we're mainly just using build processes here to add our own stuff on top, and we're focused on sort of continuity. So there was no switchover day when we started to use the system. No one would have known. So it's just component by component. We also had to move to Drupal 8. So there was enough work to shift it rather than getting too many stakeholders involved in a redesign. So it doesn't look any different, but we're using the design system now. So yeah.
I think it's really it's inspiring to think about beginning to use the design system and nothing changes too much yet. It's just like a little bit here, a little bit there. It's like thinking about it through that sort of continuity lens of like, how can you do it without, I always think of it as opening up the big silver dome and like presenting your new meal.
Yeah, whenever there's a big ribbon cutting, there's a lot of people involved, and we should really, in my view, be focused on the individual parts and how they work with UX, not like how does the homepage look. So yeah, that's what we're focused. I always say we're subversively redesigning because people don't know, and we saw this coming from a long way away on the version 1. Just made a lot of sense. So we started to, even without using the system, we started to look at it for guidance. And so I guess in that way, that's the maturity model. But we started saying, well, you like the headings like this, you like them like this. Let's look at the consensus in this design system that's being worked on.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Lisa. Are you there, Lisa?
Here, I'm trying to unmute myself.
Ah.
I always struggle with that one. So I'm Lisa Richman, and I am at CDC. And we kind of, I guess you could say we kind of back-ended into the system in a way, because we are on our 4th iteration of our template design. So we are currently in template package 4. And template package 4 was released, and I had to jot down all these dates because I always forget them. We had launched template package 4 at the end of 2018, but we had started our development on it in the summer of 2017. You can probably hear me a lot better now.
Very clear now.
Yes, very clear with our stakeholder interviews. So we had built this great system, which was actually an iteration on our previous system, which was template package 3. And then one of the exercises that we did internally is, once our system came out and we started, getting buy-in and people were going into it, we looked at the US web design system when you guys started putting out information and kind of checked ourselves. And it was really great because you came at the system from a perspective of good design and a good solid user experience. And so it was great because we could kind of check ourselves and go, we're doing that too. Oh, we're doing that too. Oh, we're not lining up here. I wonder why. And it made us think more about our system. And so I thought it was a really, great experience. And in terms of the maturity model, we do slow little incremental changes to our template design. We actually release updates monthly, but they can be small or they can be large when we offer new features, but we try to come out at least with bug fixes or things like that monthly, because people get a little antsy once we get a certain amount of bugs built up. But we're not tied to that. Sometimes it can be every couple of months. And usually I think we probably do large scale overhauls maybe every 3 or 4 years. When we went into our most recent template design, which again was template package 4, I think we were due, I think it had been about 4.5 years since our last design, and it was a little old and stale by that point. So
I'm definitely, and I hope we have the time to dig into this a little more, like curious for teams that are sort of mature, like your team, Lisa, who you've been doing this for a while. You've built up a lot of skills in a lot of the areas that are very, very consistent with what we introduced as design principles. Like how, maybe we just keep it in mind, like just how you got your team to where it is now. For a lot of teams, I think making changes, and sometimes even small changes, or thinking about things from the angle of user-centered design or incremental change is just like, may sort of seem impossible. Like they seem like huge mountains that will not move. And for teams that have some of this built in, like how you got to where you are, and I think we'll try to dig into that a little bit later. Like
Sure.
what teams can begin to do to get to have a more full functional, cross-functional, like user-centered team, from being in the many places where teams are right now. is a big practical question for a lot of folks. And with that, Stan will answer that question of how you do it. But no,
Yeah,
Stan.
easy question, easy. So I'm Stan. I'm with the Web Solutions team in the Department of Commerce. We manage probably a dozen external sites, a few internal sites, and some applications in the middle. We have been using the design system since I got here, thanks largely to Abby and the folks on my team. I sort of arrived and I learned about the design system. It was a crash course, and it was great. I essentially learned when we were launching the new Commerce.gov, which is on Drupal 8, which is on the design system version 1. We're still working on upgrading to version 2. But yeah, so it's a wonderful system. Our experience has been a little bit different in that we haven't done as much incremental sort of rolling out of the design system as much as we do big site redesigns and say, hey, it's got the design system now. Isn't this great? So we're working on one of those big redesigns for MBDA, which is the Minority Business Development Agency. It's a bureau here within Commerce. We're working on upgrading from Drupal 7 to 8, and also including the new design system as part of that upgrade. So we still have plenty of Drupal 7 sites and that will eventually need a facelift. So our sort of goal is to try and get as many sites as possible on the design system and really try to, as we're doing that, mature our process. So sort of shifting over to that new principles and the maturity model, I think we have some strengths, mostly on the technical side. I think we could definitely improve our process, being better about being iterative, being better about doing usability. But yeah, we love the system. We try to use it as much as we can, and I feel like we learn more and more every time we start a new site and start a new version.
Awesome. I know that there's so many teams that use Drupal in one way or another, and we're doing better, I think, in understanding that there are all of these teams that use them and finding opportunities to be able to use their Drupal experience to inform another team's project. But I imagine that there are still tremendous opportunities to continue that and to make some of that and to have the improvements that others are making to their own sort of Drupal implementations to some way let the design system be a channel so that other teams can hear about that and can grow with it. It's been a challenge from the design system side to figure out where the right place is to help with that and to encourage that and to see where we can be a help. But I think that there is still opportunity because there are so many teams doing that. But then there are so many teams doing all kinds of different implementations, and that's a general sort of challenge for the design system in general. But yeah, Drupal, I think, is at least in government for the foreseeable future is going to be a major opportunity for teams to share. Honestly, it's actually a really good opportunity because so many teams are on that platform. And we'll end up with Aaron, and then we'll start jump into some more freeform discussion.
Hi, everybody. This is Aaron Stienestra. I'm with GSA's Office of Customer Experience. I'm fairly new to the agency. I came from the Office of Personnel Management. I was a fellow at the lab there at OPM. And compared to the rest of the panelists who are really knowledgeable and really working on the technical sides of things and working in Drupal, like, working with the tokens and sort of thinking about releases and so forth, like, I think I and my team in the Office of Customer Experience are working sort of more at the strategic level, and meaning like working to think about like who our key customers are and what are their core needs. So within the maturity model, I think it's really thinking within like step one, like who are our customers and what are their real needs, both for the the purpose of sort of GSA's business, sort of cross-cutting, but also for GSA's digital platforms too. And one area that we work with is GSA's sort of digital experience, which includes the acquisitions platforms. It includes GSA.gov. It includes several other websites that GSA customers access for different needs. And I think that there's several subdomains, more than 100 as far as I understand. And so that's a pretty big number of sites to govern and to think about what your core customers needs are, and how to have there be consistency both within the content and the user experience and visual design and sort of GSA's brand there. And so one way that I think that within that enterprise digital governance sort of team that we have, that we've hit some stall points, and I think that is because of the size of the reach there. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is really looking at GSA.gov to mature that site and to use the web design system and to prove it out as a proof of concept. And so that's where we're working at now. And it's a collaboration between our team, the Office of Strategic Communications, and the CIO's office. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is to really sort of from a high level have alignment around what is the purpose of GSA.gov. Is this a sort of an extended sort of corporate brochure, if you will? Is this just sort of going to be organized by the corporate org chart? What, who's it for and how should it be oriented? And we've been trying to advocate for this should be a tool that GSA customers come to get what they need. They have a task or they have something they need to do, and it should be oriented to meet that need. And so and I think it's something that everybody agrees on conceptually, but when it comes time to make decisions about how it should be sort of designed and oriented, does that follow through? And so we've been trying to sort of assess, do we know enough about our customers to sort of move forward from where we're at now? Do we have enough user research, or do we need to go back out and really sort of update our knowledge on where they are and how the site should be designed? So that's part one. And then part two is really kind of putting forth a hypothesis around how we feel like GSA.gov should be redesigned to meet user needs. And then part three would be to build out a prototype that would be sort of a proof of concept that could get folks excited about updating the site to be what you'd imagine it to be, sort of in line with the USWDS standards. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, if you look at GSA.gov currently, I think that you can see things that show sort of stylistic consistency with the system. However, I think that it's been incremental, and I think our challenge is to really make sure that we're aligned on the principles and aligned on what customers need from the site as we move into the future.
Kind of a big, it's sort of a big question when you really start digging into, these sort of big picture things like, I don't know, consistency, continuity, and user needs. These are things where, it depends on how your organization is organized. Who has the resources to understand where your particular service or where your particular site fits in with the larger organization. You might have some research, you might have some ability to do research for your project that helps you figure out how it's doing and how it's set up just when it's thinking about itself. But you're not necessarily, you might not have the resources to go in and say how does my project fit in with this other project, or what are the large scale kind of user journeys that are crossing through all of these different services. You begin to get into these sort of meta user experiences that cross between different places, and rare is the project that has the resources to do meta research on how folks are using their thing, as well as using this other thing, as well as using that other thing. And I think that's a big it's something that could potentially be really powerful if as organizations think about this, to be able to give guidance to other kinds of projects that are within their organization. But it's the sort of thing that it's hard for it to bubble up. And thinking about just the role of that, thinking about what the role is between the larger organizations and the smaller projects, and how to distribute information and resources between them is a big sort of ongoing concern. I would imagine that the design principles only serve to uncover that as a need, maybe, but not as don't point toward solutions exactly. And so that we began to speak of it a little bit as we're going through this, but I think there are a lot of things that everyone on this panel is doing really well, and I think you have and have really, in many ways, really good sort of high functioning teams. And I'm wondering and this is sort of to anyone really, but what's one thing that you wish teams across government could be doing that you feel has really worked really well for your team, and you wish you could just wave a magic wand and be able to apply to any team that wanted it?
I can take a stab at that one. If you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
So one thing that I think that we do very well as a team is one of our main goals is communication across the agency about what we're doing, and we've been lucky in that aspect, in that we have kind of garnered trust through doing that, and we have, you know, we look at this as a very collaborative experience. You know, we're not designing, we're not coming up with ideas inside of a box. You know, we're talking to the content folks, we're talking to the 508 folks, we're doing it all together, and we've created this very kind of holistic team where we do these things together, and then we go out to the agency and present these things so that everyone buys into it. So it's not like it's our template, it's CDC's template. You know, I think everybody in digital media at CDC feels part of this, and part of, they feel like they were included in the development of this product. So I think that's one thing that I would say has been successful for us, that I would wish that I could wave a magic wand and have everyone experience that.
Anyone else have anything to add to what Lisa's saying?
Sure. So I know, as far as our team, we're probably not as good at communication as Lisa's team. I think the main strength that we have is trying to integrate accessibility into our methodology of developing new features or fixing bugs on our website. We have a way to make sure that we do both automated testing, but also manual testing that you need to do for accessibility. And so every change that happens to our site that touches design or touches how components are displayed, we make sure that there's a check that a developer does. You have one developer who submits the change, and the other one that reviews it. Make sure there's a little checkbox they have to do every time that says you didn't introduce any A or AA accessibility errors. And so that's something that you have to do, and that's something that our continuous integration pipeline makes sure that it checks against, to sort of say, this is what the website was before, this is what it is now, sort of what might have changed, what might have broken or fixed, an error. Hopefully fixed, hopefully not more bugs. So that's something that I feel like we're pretty strong at. I think where we could definitely improve as far as how our team works is starting with real user needs. I think we start with real users within our agencies, but maybe not real users within the general public. And I don't know if folks have a good way of sort of finding these real people, whoever they are, and getting some info or feedback from them. I know I've done some research into usability studies, sort of doing them with a shoestring budget, in effect $0 budget, which we've done a lot of sort of talking and discussions about starting up, but it's never a priority. So it's one of those things that we want to do, but it's finding the time and the priority to sort of bake that into our process and really try to mature it.
Let me know how it works.
I'm wondering, Aaron, if from your perspective, from sort of the big customer experience strategy perspective, what would you recommend a team? How would they begin to talk to others in their organization around surfacing the kinds of needs that they have? Or do you have any thought around what a good way might be to begin to say, hey, I've heard about these things. I know that I'm weak here. What can I do now? It doesn't have to be, certainly not specific to GSA or anything like that, but are there any good ways to think about how to bubble these ideas up from the practitioner level to someone who might be able to help them out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the way that we do it is a combination of quantitative surveying of customers. That's one of the things that the Office of Customer Experience manages, is the surveys across GSA. And so different insights or trends can bubble up there in the surveys. And one of the things that we also do is, we've worked with different offices within GSA to do, workshops like, human-centered design type oriented like workshops where, we will have a challenge area or, an area within what their office does, and we'll, sort of brainstorm together to, highlight some of the pain points and sort of moments that matter, if you will, that they know that their customers have. And that can be a little bit circular too, because you're working from your own assumptions and your own maybe bias baked into that if you don't have those customers in the room. But one byproduct of doing something like that would be the identification of like, this is an assumption or this is a bias, and it may be true, and we sort of use it as a principle, yet maybe we do want to talk to a few customers to either contradict this or to validate it. And so that, that sort of session can be a way for folks in those offices to know which questions we might want to ask, or like which customers we might want to solicit feedback from or to have conversations with. So that can help focus something that's like, we need to talk to customers, but who and where and how, to be like, well, we think we should talk to these customers because we have a hypothesis that, logging into the website is a real pain. And so maybe we should talk to a few people there. And so then, even if you don't have very many resources or time, like at least you've like constrained it a little bit, and you can try to like be creative within like a smaller like focus area. So that's typically how we work. I mean, we have a very small team, like we have less than 10 people, and we are looking at the customer experience, across, GSA, and we're talking about the entire country of people, accessing buildings and, you need to buy things through acquisitions. And so we tend to have to try to be creative and look for trends in the data and, do some customer conversations where we can. But I totally hear you, Stan, about, it can be hard with, without a given, budget to go out and do, extensive qualitative research or, deep user testing. But I think kind of focusing in like problem framing can at least help you know where to use the limited resources that you have.
And if I can jump in there too. So that's also, I would say, our weakest point at ATF right now is the starting with real user needs, but then also listening at the end. And so one thing that I was able to do as a supervisor, but I think at other agencies where you're more split up, you'd have to kind of work across teams. Like at Commerce, you have to do OCIO and OPA together. But we added this year to everybody's performance plan, we added one element for research and evaluation, which was focused on user research, talking with customers, and with analytics, like using data to inform our decisions. And so, of course, how that succeeds looks different for our writer than it does for our content manager, right? But by building that in and having really specific kind of, what does this look like and how would this be part of your job, we kind of have built that in as an expectation of this is something everyone on the team's going to do. My other tip is kind of when I sat down with my team, we were like, what are our research questions? Like, I don't know, like this is really a big thing to start thinking about, and where do we even start? A book that really, really clicked with me and with the team was called Top Task by Jerry McGovern. I know he's done a Digital.gov talk before. That's where I heard of him first. And it's like a really good, it like literally lays out a whole month-long, like several month-long process to identify your top tasks, but then that informs literally every other part of the services you give and the digital products that you're serving. And so we're kind of at the very beginning of that, but that was a nice, like literally pick up this book. We all kind of do a mini book club on it. And then we have something to go start researching that is kind of proven to be useful when we're done. So that would be my two tips. And then my final thing is for what I wish that we could see in government more. I really wish there was an easy way for us to share our user research across different agencies. And I know there are kind of questions about privacy, right? You collect people's information, you're having them say, you know, your recordings won't be shared. But if there was kind of an easier way for us to share, here are the conclusions and the what we heard from our users when we did user research, and sharing, here's the study we did. Because I know as we're starting, we have there's a few government sites like EERE over at Energy.gov has an awesome site where they're like, here are the templates of emails that we send our like our screener questionnaire and what we send research participants after we're done. That was so helpful. I'm like, oh God, here's another agency who's done it. They're giving me literal examples that I can start adapting. I feel like I can do this now. It doesn't feel like this big, scary, abstract thing.
So useful to have a concrete example and like an actual someone who's done the thing. You can look at it, you can structure something based on it, you can use it as a way to grow your own practice. It's yeah, I totally would love to be able to facilitate that in some way, or be able to push toward some way that we're able to better share research, or even if not research, like to help expand something like the 18F method cards to like to just be a better teacher for these methods, and to give tools to work in the service of those methods. Because there's one of the things I learn, and I suspect that we all learn, is that there's a tremendous amount of valuable material out here across government. It's like an enormous group of people doing a lot of good work, and if even we can begin to connect it, just 10% of those people, I think we'll begin to see some real possibilities here. And even also from the other side, that even something with 21st century idea or other kinds of things that are getting us even explicitly focused on thinking about real user needs in our audience in a very sort of explicit way and a direct way. That kind of pressure is only going to be a good thing as we move forward. To remember that is a big, important, maybe even the key priority at the end of the day, and that you can throw a lot of technology at a lot of things, but if it doesn't sort of move in the service of that thing, then it's probably not delivering. I see time flies so fast. We have like 7 minutes left, and I haven't even gotten to Jon on question number 2. If you have a magic wand, Jon, and you were wanting to wave it, this is your opportunity to wave it before I jump into the questions from the chat.
I was just going to add to, if you have a small group, being really agile and iterative like that, working really fast, we're just promoting stuff every day instead of having a meeting like, oh, is this tab, that speed sometimes can, hurt UX sometimes, but no one's going to give us a perfect project plan with a waterfall chart on how to implement US web design system. So, in that way, it helps to have a very agile team that's sort of dedicated to doing these things as we go.
Thanks, Jon. I feel really fortunate to have been able to spend the limited time we have had together today to talk with you all. I think it only kind of doubles down on what I've mentioned a moment ago about just the real wealth of resources that we have across all of these teams who are really doing great work. And I know that there's a lot that we can do from the design system side to, build out new functionality and things like that. But what I'm hopeful that we can do in addition to all of that is to grow the opportunity for all of us to know that we all exist, and to give ourselves an opportunity to share better and more effectively share what we do, so that we all are starting from something, rather than feeling like we're all on our own to start from square one. So thank you for sharing what you do, and I am so happy to have you part of this community and helping us improve all the things that we're trying to improve every day. I really appreciate that. There's like a couple questions that I will try to get into. I don't know if there were any questions that were directly focused at the panel. We got the question I think we get almost every monthly call, which is, are the design assets available in Figma? And they are not. There are some essentially like technical reasons why we have not been able to release them in Figma. The most technical being I'm not able to use Figma, so that keeps me from creating those assets. We do have assets, however, in Adobe XD, and I think that there is an opportunity for the broader community to potentially push us in the direction of having Figma assets. I bet you there's some out there somewhere. And that's why we have a public Slack at USWDS public Slack that you can get to. It's in the chat here, but it's at chat.18f.gov to sign up for that. And I think you could begin to probe that community for the existence of tools that you don't see on the design system website. And then we will continue to try to do a better job at taking things from that public Slack and from the community and displaying them somewhere on our own site to make them even easier to find. That's a big goal for the coming year.
Can I pose a question to the other folks on the panel?
Absolutely.
Anyone using the Nunjux templates straight from the standards? That's a little bit of a pain point for us. You know, you basically have to redo it in Twig, and I don't know why exactly, because it's so similar to Nunjux, but just curious.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how many folks. I would be surprised. It's probably rare if anyone tries to use anything like templated markup out of the design system source. That it's likely that almost every team needs to build their own templates manually from our just like outputted HTML. And I certainly consider that a major flaw. And I would like to think that there's some way to do a better job of providing our markup in some easier to consume fashion, so that every time there's a change or every time you're working to work on your own implementation, it's not just, I got to build this thing from scratch by copying and pasting from the design system website and building a new template in Twig or in whatever template language you use. So I think we'll want to talk about that more during the year, because that's definitely on my mind and on our peek into the roadmap, like trying to figure out how to better deliver components. I see there's a 1-minute warning. It's 1:29. I'm gonna scroll up here to see if there's any. Let's see. Bootstrap was the easiest framework to learn via their website. Any plans to have something similar for the design system? Well, that's another peek into the roadmap. But I think we understand that one of the big barriers to entry for the design system is sort of a lack of maybe like a quick start guide or of ways for teams to easily sort of get a starter project or something going to learn how to use it in a way that's a little bit more of a guided learning experience from our side. Right now, it's possibly a little bit closer to just a wall of documentation that you have to just accept, but that's not the way it should be. And when we talk again next month, you will see that working in the direction of providing better tools like we have requested in the chat is something that's coming, well, I don't know soon, but 2020 roadmap coming in 2020. So we're now at time. Thank you all for coming today. Everyone who attended the call, and particularly thanks to the panel who we had here. I couldn't be more pleased to give you the opportunity to talk about what you do. Thank you so much.